Hello and welcome to another review of Junji Ito Maniac Japanese Tales of the Macabre. This is episode 10, and we got two segments, Unendurable Labyrinth and The Bully. So we'll start off with the first segment, Unendurable Labyrinth, or as the manga chapter is called, Unbearable Maze. So this one is about two friends, Noriko and Sayoko, and they are going hiking in the mountains, and they end up getting lost. And so they're trying to find their way back to the main road so they can go back home when they come across a bunch of Buddhists walking down. And the Buddhists look kind of creepy. So they decide, okay, well, maybe we can follow them and we can find some location based off that. And they see the Buddhists and they're doing some kind of weird like rituals. We see a bunch of them standing under a waterfall screaming. We see some of them hanging upside down from a cliffside, and they're kind of wondering what the hell is going on when another Buddhist member shows up behind them and says they're followers and they're conducting their training. And he's like, oh, you guys must have gone lost. I'm kind of surprised that you ended up in this area, since this area is kind of sealed from the outside world. It's not really all that easy to get in, and it's kind of hard to get out. And it appears that's going to be nightfall soon, so why don't you just stay here for the night, and we can show you the way the next day. And so he takes them back to their temple, and the girls are like questioning, like, what kind of sect does the temple belong to and stuff. And he explains that their origins lie in esoteric Buddhism, but their specific teachings are kind of unique. And so Noriko's like, oh, so you're a new sect, right? And he's like, well, we've been around for way too long to be called that. They go and they see this like meditation room, and he explains that those with troubled hearts kind of come here to improve their spiritual well-being. Do you want to partake in some meditation before you leave? And Noriko's like, nah, I'm good. I think we can go. But then he turns to Sayoko, who seems to be having some problems. So they participate in the meditation, and we see Sayoko going deep into thought, and her thoughts are about all the other school kids are kind of making cruel remarks about her, about how she might be a terrible person. Like, just look at her face and stuff. And so she becomes paranoid about people staring at her without her knowledge. And we get this funny moment, at least I kind of got a chuckle out of it, where just as Sayoko is getting deeper into her thoughts, there's this black sound, and she she gasps. And then it cuts to her friend right next to her who just got whacked with a stick. And her friend's like, well, that woke me up. Because basically she fell asleep during the meditation. It's just, the way it's played, it's just, I got a chuckle out of it. I thought it was a little funny moment. But eventually they go back to their rooms where they're going to be staying the night. And they come across this other girl named Kuramoto. And Kuramoto is actually at the temple because she's trying to find her long lost brother. Her brother came across this sect and disappeared, and she believes that he might be around here somewhere. It doesn't really explain too much in the anime, but it doesn't explain too much in the manga either about why the girls decided to stay here for so long, like for many days. Because originally the plan was that they would just stay there the night and then leave the next morning, and they were just like kind of participating in the meditation as before they leave. But I mean, I guess in the anime it's kind of, the way it's portrayed, it kind of seems like it's all in one day, because like basically when nightfall comes, the three girls leave to try to find Kuramoto's brother. But in the manga, it's explained that like there's a scene where they are forced to wake up at like, I think it's 5 a.m. So it's kind of shown that they're there for multiple days. It never really explains why. I guess I kind of like the change in the anime more, where it makes it seem like, okay, we're just going to be here for the night and then we're going to leave in the morning. And I guess since we're here, we might as well participate in your meditation, but we're still going to be leaving in the morning. That makes more sense to me than the manga did. So I guess that was a nice change. But eventually they head out, and I don't know if, oh yeah, it's actually mentioned here. Yeah, that the girls overhear the Buddhists, like the ones that they saw at the waterfall and at the cliffside, that they're the chosen, and they're being chosen for eternal meditation. And Sayako and Noriko are kind of confused on what that is, and Kuromoto explains what it is, and it's basically they're going to become living mummies. And for anyone who's kind of like confused on what exactly that is, the manga explains it more. Like it shows like a graph of how it's done and stuff. And this is actually a real thing. You can just type in like Buddhist mummies. The practice is called Nyojo. I probably completely butchered that. But basically, what it is a practitioner will change their diet to consist of nothing but like salts, nuts, seeds, roots, pine bark, a specific type of tea, and they would be buried alive in this pine wood box that's completely filled with salt and has a little tiny tube for air. And the Buddhist monk will ring the bell signifying that they're still alive. And they would basically just sit there in the lotus position doing their mantras and meditating until eventually they die. And the people outside will know that they're dead once they hear the bell stop ringing. And once the bell stops ringing, the air tube will be removed, and there you go. The body stays inside the pine box filled with salt and eventually becomes mummified. Really, in my opinion, kind of horrifying practice. I guess according to Wikipedia, they banned it in 1879. But this was an actual practice that they did. And this plays a part in this story because that's what the Chosen are going to do. They're basically going to do a modified version of becoming living mummies. And so the girls sneak out and they see the Chosen marching and they decide to follow after them. And eventually they find the Chosen going inside this underground area under this giant Buddha statue. And of course, Noriko wants to leave, but Kuromoto's like, go ahead if you want, but I gotta go in and try to find my brother. He might be in there. So eventually they feel compelled to follow after Kuromoto and they go inside the maze. And inside the maze, they find a bunch of mummified Buddhists standing, just like lined up in a row. So basically they go inside, rather than going inside a wooden pine box filled with salt, they go into this underground labyrinth where they stand still until they become mummified. And eventually they're just going through this maze of bodies until eventually Kuromoto finds her brother, who's already dead and become mummified. And she, of course, starts crying. She breaks down. She tells the other two girls, like, go on without me. I want to stay with my brother for a while. And she hands over her flashlight. And the other girls start leaving. But as they're going, they get lost. And they're like wondering if they're going to be stuck here forever. And eventually Sayako collapses and she just starts freaking out. She starts yelling at them to stop staring at her because that's her thing. Her paranoia is people staring at her and remarking about, giving cruel remarks about her. So she starts freaking out about that. And Noriko's like, what are you talking about? They're not staring at you. They're mummies. They're dead. They don't even have any eyes. Come on, we got to get out of here. And Sayako just keeps just freaking out, crying, screaming over and over again. Stop watching at me. Like everyone at school, everyone that passes me on the street, they're all staring at me. I'm being punished. And Noriko's like, they're mummies. They don't have feelings. They can't be remarking any cruel thoughts about you. Look. And the two girls look up and they see the mummies. Only they're not mummies. They're still alive. They're the Chosen that went in before, and they're all just staring at them with this kind of creepy looking face. And of course, Noriko freaks out and screams, don't look at me. And that's how the episode ends. So yeah, it kind of a weird episode. The story itself is, it's faithful. It's pretty much a 1-for-1 adaptation. So yeah, if you like the segment, then you'll like the chapter. If you don't like the segment, you're not going to like the chapter. It's a 1-for-1, pretty much. I don't really notice any differences other than, I guess, in the manga, the mummification is explained a little bit more in detail, but that's pretty much it. Other than that, everything is pretty much the same. And then we get the next story, which is The Bully. And oh man, was this story messed up. And the funny thing is, like, this is one of the most messed up Junji Ito stories, And it's one of the few that doesn't have any kind of supernatural or like cosmic horrors or anything. It's just real life horrors. So the anime starts with this girl named Kuriko, and Kuriko is at the park. There's this boy named Utaro who she has a crush on, but Utaro's playing with his male friends. He's not interested in girls at this point in time. And this mother shows up with her son, and her son's name is Nayo. And she gives Kuriko a bar of chocolate to play with her son. And so Kuriko does that first. And, they go and they start playing on the swings and just playing in the sandbox and all this stuff. There's kids being kids playing together. But eventually, as the days pass, Nayo kind of becomes like obsessed with Kuriko and is constantly hugging her and following her around. And Kuriko starts becoming frustrated at this. She doesn't want to be hanging out with Nayo all the time. She wants to go hang out with Utaro, the boy she has a crush on. Eventually, she starts taking her frustrations out on Nayo. She starts bullying him, and she does like terrible things. Like she first says, "Do you want to hear something interesting?" And then she screams in his ear. She tells him that there's a brain-eating bug in there and starts yanking on his ears. She forces him to eat gutter water. She beats him with a stick. She tries to convince him to jump from a high jungle gym until his mom shows up to stop him from doing that. And the next day, she takes him to see this dog, and she throws the ball at the dog, and the dog's like barking like crazy. And she tells Nayo to go get the ball. And he refuses, and then she shoves him in there, and we just hear Nayo screaming as Kuriko runs away. And then we cut to the present day, where we see Kuriko, who is now dating Utaro, and they're about to. I think he's asked her to marry him, and she's like, "Before I accept, I have to get something off my chest." And she explains this story, and he forgives her. He's like, "You were just a kid. It's fine. That doesn't change how I feel about you." But then she explains, that's not it. Like, there's still more. She explains how not too long ago she ran into Nayo, who's all grown up. He has scars on his neck, presumably from the dog attack. And Nayo recognizes Kuriko, and he kind of just treats her like an old friend. Like, he invites her to go get some drinks. He says that he's glad that he sees her. He wants to go back to the playground where they were as a kid. And while there, he confesses that the reason that he followed Kuriko around all the time was because he was in love with her, and he could never stop thinking about her. And Kuriko explains to Utaro that this relieved her of all the guilt that she's been carrying for years. And Utaro's like kind of surprised that she was seeing another guy. Not in the romantic sense, but just that she was meeting with another guy. She's like, "Okay, well, that's the only time you saw him, right?" And she explains, "No, I've been seeing him multiple times ever since. In fact, I'm going to see him right now." And Nayo shows up. And Kuriko tells Utaro, "I'm sorry, but I'm in love with Nayo. I can't marry you. I'm going to be with him instead." And then we flash forward some years where Nayo has gone and Kuriko have gone married. They have a kid. Nayo has run off. He's disappeared. And the boy, his name is Hiroshi, he starts whining about how he's hungry. And Kuriko tells him, like, knock it off, I'm making food. And as they're eating dinner, just like a bunch of fish. And Hiroshi says that he doesn't want to eat this. He wants to eat rice and curry and omelets. And he starts just kind of whining about this. And Kuriko says, "Shut up, Nayo." And the boy is surprised. He's like, "Mommy, my name's not Nayo. It's Hiroshi." And she apologizes and she says, "You look so much like your father. I used to bully him as a kid. I think he secretly liked when I bullied him. I wonder what he's doing. I bet this is his revenge for me bullying him, is basically marrying her, impregnating her, and then running off and leaving her with the kid." And she's like, "I really want to bully him again." And then she stares at her son. And then we cut to her son crying because Kuriko has yanked his ear. And she tells him to shut up. And as she's doing that, she's putting on makeup. And she yells at her son, like, "Little boys need to be tougher. Stop crying, Nayo. You're such a terrible child." And the boy's like, "My name's not Nayo." And that's when we get this horrifying moment where Kuriko steps out and she's dressed up just like she was back when she was a kid. But she's like wearing like clothes that are too short on her. The makeup is all messed up. Like she just looks horrifying. And she basically says, "We're going to the park to play." And she takes her son outside at night and they're heading towards the park and she starts cackling. And basically, it's just kind of insinuating that she's going to start mistreating her son even more. And that's how it ends. And yeah, this one was messed up. Like this episode was like, it was hard to read and then hard to watch just because this one is just so human. Like there's no supernatural elements. There's no like ghosts or aliens or monsters or anything other than just a girl losing her mind and just abusing a child twice. This one is also pretty faithful to the manga. I would say the only difference is just the way the framing is. So in the manga, we start off with Kuriko and Yutaro as adults, and she explains how before I can marry you, there's something I got to get off my chest. And then we cut to the flashback of her as a kid. Whereas in the anime here, we already started off with them in the flashback, and we didn't get to the part that it was actually a story until later on. So that's the only difference. Everything else is pretty much the same. And yeah, it's hard because on the one hand, it's like you want to root for Nayo because, you know, he was very physically bullied by Kuriko. I mean, to the point where she could have killed him multiple times. She almost drowned him in gutter water. She beat the crap out of him with a stick. She shoved him into an angry dog that mauled him. Could have mauled him to death very easily, especially when you see the scars on his neck. So if all he did was just ruin her marriage, like basically convince her to leave Yutaro for him and then stood her up at the wedding, then that would have been okay. But it's the fact that he went along with the marriage, got her pregnant, and then left behind an innocent kid to get bullied. That's the part where it's like, okay, now there are no good guys in this story. Everyone sucks. Everyone's terrible except for Hiroshi. Hiroshi is the only like innocent person in this entire episode, in this entire story, and he's the one that gets a horrifying ending because Nayo gets his revenge. Kuriko falls into madness, but she also gets to go back and become a bully again and gets to live out her cruel fantasies on her son. And her son's the only one that like he never did anything wrong, and yet he's the one that gets the terrible ending. So it's kind of just, it's really upsetting. Messed up. But I liked it. This was a good episode. I think the maze one was not as strong. Like I said, it's one for one faithful to the original story, but the original story itself is not all that great. It's just more of like an average Junji Ito story. So yeah, there are better stories out there they could have chosen for this segment. But whatever. And the boy is, it's one of those Junji Ito stories that have always stuck with me. Like I can never forget it. It's horrifying in a realistic way. But yeah, I enjoyed this episode overall. I thought it was pretty good. But there you go. There's Junji Ito Maniac, Japanese Tales of the Macabre, episode 10, Unendurable Labyrinth, and The Bully. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Later.